Danny Higginbotham, Academy graduate, former United defender. Welcome.
How
How's it
are you?
going? I'm good. How are you
Very.
doing?
I'm doing good. It was surprising to hear from you yesterday out of the blue from nowhere, and I just thought, it's a familiar voice, a Manchester voice, and it's good to catch up because obviously, I think we crossed paths quite a bit ago, but
Yeah, 12
it's
years.
always nice. Yeah, it's always nice to speak to a familiar face, and like I say, a familiar accent as well.
Ha! Well, that's the thing. You're on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. We're giving it an international flavour today, aren't we?
Yeah, well, you're showing it, your background showing it, the weather. You got a bit of everything there. I'm in a hotel room at the moment because obviously I've got a game that I'm covering tomorrow. But it's what's it where you are is 3 hours, isn't it? 3 hours difference on the West Coast to the
Yeah,
East
yeah.
Coast. Yeah, so you're 3 hours behind, which is crazy because it's one country and there's just so many different time zones. It's unbelievable.
So, by way of introduction, how long have you been out here in America working?
Well, how long is it now? I think it'll be 5 years this October coming, and it's just
Right.
you know what it's like. Time flies.
Yeah.
It goes really really quick. I think the sport is growing hugely over here. Obviously, the World Cup being here in 2026. MLS as a league is growing. Messi's obviously had a huge part to play in that, and Apple are involved in it now, which obviously gives it a greater gravitas. And so you just find he's traveling all over, mainly the East Coast, and then sometimes on the West Coast during the weekends. Everywhere's
Yeah.
a flight near enough, so that's something that takes a little bit of getting used to.
So, in punditry terms, let's turn the lens on you. Are you a Roy Keane type or a Gary Neville type pundit?
Well, first and foremost, I wasn't any of those types of players. They were like far ahead of me as in terms of levels. Probably if I had to say, it would be more like Gary Neville. I think Roy Keane is as he was as a player. Pulls no punches. Says it how he sees it. He's honest, and I think his honesty actually sort of creates this thing where you want to hear more from him because, like I say, he's just going to be brutally honest regardless, and I think that's great. Whereas with Gary, Gary for me is arguably one of the best analysts around, the way that he breaks down games, the way that he calls the games and things like that. So two very, very different people within the media side of things, but two right at the top of their game. There's no question about it.
Sticking with the Neville theme, obviously you had the pleasure the other week of interviewing Philip over in
Yeah.
Portland. It's a small world, isn't it? You're 5,000 miles away from or more from Manchester, and there you are. Just did it strike you in the moment as how far you both come?
Not really because like Phil's obviously been over here for a long time. He was at Inter Miami
Yeah.
before, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for what he did there because I think that's enabled him to do what they're doing now. And then he got the job then in Portland, which is a huge football area. Things are going well for him as well, which is great. But I've known Phil obviously since we were at United together. Obviously, his career at Manchester United, the two don't reflect each other. I left at the age of 21. He was part of the incredible young players that were coming through at that time that had unbelievable careers and then went on to Everton. But I've been in contact with Phil for a number of years now, and even more so really since I moved over here, to do with MLS and everything like that. So we'll swap texts every now and then. If I've got one of his games, I'll give him a call and we'll have a chat. And then yeah, I went to do an interview, and the first thing he did, he just hammered my clothes. So some things never change, but no, it's always good. And like with Phil, he leaves no stone unturned. When he's coaching side of things, he's unbelievable. He's exactly as he was as a player. Gets the absolute most out of himself. Gets the most out of his players as well. And I love the fact that they're having a better season this year, Portland. But I love to see people like him have success because he's such a good guy.
Yep. Bob on, Bob on. So putting your pundit hat on firmly.
Mm.
It's a massive game this weekend, Manchester Derby. Head over heart, what's going to happen? Because I personally, obviously I know the outcome I want, but I just cannot fathom, based on the small sample size of the season so far, I cannot fathom what's going to happen.
No, and I did. I spoke to someone early on, and they asked me the same question, and it's one of those where I'm like, I have no idea, because
Yeah,
I think you look at it and it's, you know, with Man United, obviously with Amorim, he's now getting his own players in. But the problem is, you know, you see the TV this morning, Mount's out, Cunha's out, Dallow's out. Now, for me, I've always said it before, like people talk about the players that have been at Manchester United over years, the real good players when they had the success. And not only were they good players, but mentally they were just incredibly strong. Because there's been some outstanding players go to Manchester United and the shirt's been too heavy for them. And
yeah,
that's when you look at the greats at Manchester United over the years. Not only have they been unbelievable players, but the shirt doesn't weigh heavy on them. I remember seeing Cunha the first time he put on Manchester United shirt, and I was like, he's one of those guys. This shirt does not weigh heavy on him. You can see it's as though like he wants to be the guy. He wants to be part of this process of getting Manchester United back to where they believe they should be. So he will be a really big miss. I think obviously Mbumo, he brings something a little bit different than Manchester United have missed, which is pace going forward. Then obviously Fernandez, you know, he's had some good games in this rivalry, so to speak. And then there's a goalkeeping situation, so it's a really difficult one. But you add all of that together, and like I was sort of saying it like tongue in cheek to one of my friends earlier on who lives over here and he's a Man City fan. Man United are ahead of Man City in the league,
yeah.
which for everything that's going on, and I know it's only 3 games, and I get it, but it's like I think as a Man United fan, you hold on to whatever you can at the moment, and you do. And I think the fascinating thing about the game this weekend with Amorim is like, how does he approach this game? We know
Yeah,
that he's a manager now that wants to dominate the ball. When you look at the results that Manchester City have had so far this season, and sometimes when they fall a little bit flat, is when teams play against them on the counter attack. We saw Brighton do it really well. Obviously, Tottenham, it was an absolute masterclass from Thomas
yeah,
Frank.
yeah.
And you look at it and you think to yourself, okay, well, would Amorim do that? And I don't know whether he would, because he was really steadfast last season, and that's why I had that respect for him. It was sort of, it wasn't about the results for him last season. I think it was about looking at the players and saying, right, this is a style I'm going to play at this football club for as long as I'm here. So I
Yeah.
need to know which players are going to suit the style, which players aren't going to suit the style, and then sort of at the back end of that, it's like, right, then I'll know the type of players that I need to bring into the club. So I think that in itself is fascinating how Manchester United set up against City. You know, are they going to press, but maybe just be a little bit deeper than what they usually will be? Because we know the way that Manchester City play, they may change their dynamics within the systems, but the way that they play never really tends to change, and that's dominating the ball. But they're not having the best of times at the moment, and I think it's one of those games where the first goal is everything. I think the first goal is going to be everything, because if United do, you know, look to sit a little bit deeper and look to frustrate Manchester City, and if they were to get that first goal, they've earned the right then to sit that little bit deeper and Manchester City open up more. Whereas if Man City get that first goal and United are sitting relatively deep, United then have to open up. So it's such a fascinating game, and as you said at the start, it's really really difficult to see or say, sorry, should I say, which way it's going to go.
I suppose with Amarim's approach, I mean, is it worth potentially, like you say, just going for the counter attack, just saying, right, okay, I've got a long term vision of being this ball dominant team, dominating every game, but given the value of a victory here and what it could do at this stage of the season, do you just go right, especially with the injury absentees? Do we just hunker down and go for the break? We've got the pace, we've got Sesko potentially starting as
Yeah.
so that gives you the option of going long. Is it worth just sort of short-term compromise for long-term gain?
I think ordinarily you would say yes, and that's something that I've always thought in the past. But then you go back to you go back to speaking to managers and things like that, and you sort of ask that question. Well, hang on a second. When you're playing against a team like Manchester City. Now, I'm not saying like, for example, when I was at Stoke or when I was at Southampton, or when we played Manchester City, we had no other option. Or when we played the top teams, obviously Manchester City weren't quite there at that time.
Yeah,
But when we would play the top teams, so when you would play your Manchester Uniteds, when you would play your Chelseas and your Arsenals, we understood that we had to change for that game because we were playing against opposition that were far better than us. And if we tried to go toe to toe with them, it would have been embarrassing. Now that was okay because as a group of players, we understood that we were not anywhere near as good as them. We believed that we could that we could challenge them, but it would be about bringing them down to our level. So we were okay with the managers at the time saying, listen, there's specific games where we play the way that we want to play, but there's other games where we maybe have to do things a little bit different. But I wasn't in the Manchester United dressing room. So if you're in that Manchester United dressing room as a player and you've been brought in for big money, you've been brought in to try and get the team where you want it to be, and then all of a sudden the manager says, listen, the way that we usually play, we're going to change it today because we don't think that we're good enough as a team to compete with Manchester City playing the way that we want to play. Now, I don't know how that resonates with some of the players. I think if they did that and then they ended up winning, I think it's soon forgotten. But if they've had all this work over the last whatever it is 7-8 months under Amorim to then turn up at Manchester City and go, no, we're going to change our style completely, and then you end up losing, then that looks really bad because you've got a manager that's probably strayed away from his beliefs, shown that he doesn't trust or doesn't have belief in the players that he's got. There could be an argument to say that maybe he'll do it because of the injuries that he's got. But there are players now that have been brought to this football club that he's signed. So, you have to try and give the players that belief that doesn't matter who we're playing, we're going to stick to our style. And maybe the style is the same, but it's maybe just 5 or 10 yards deeper. But to go all out defending and try and play on the counter attack, ordinarily, yes, that's what a lot of teams will do against Manchester City. But I know that Manchester United have had success doing it a few times over the years, but I don't see with the way that Amorim is and the way that he's been so adamant about his style, I don't see him being as front-footed, but I don't see them defending deep. It's sort of getting that balance right for them, I think.
It's going to be fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's so difficult to call because it's, I think ordinarily you look at it and you go, Manchester City have got the better team. But then you look at it and think, right, okay, well, Mamouche looks like he might be out. He's a huge player for them. They've still got some new players that are bedding in. And, Haaland's obviously come off the back of his international break where he's just incredible. They've got a goalkeeper situation of their own as well.
Yep.
What are you doing? Are you going to go with Trafford, who you spent all this money on but has made a few mistakes? Or you're putting Donnarumma straight in there? So, I think people are going to be looking not so much with Manchester United because obviously he's as good as named who's going to be in goal for them this weekend. But I think for Manchester City, there's a lot of things where I think Pep Guardiola has got some decisions to make because he's got a good squad. There's some players that aren't at the best of their capabilities at the moment. And at the back of it all, he's got a decision to make on a goalkeeping situation.
So the next, the wrong one. Danny, thanks so much for your time. You didn't have to do that.
problem.
I appreciate your time so much. That's brilliant.
No problem at all.